Welcome back to the JLX Friends of Benefits podcast, and a very special welcome again to Jack. Thank you very much for joining us. It's fantastic to have you again. Obviously, the people have missed you over the past couple of weeks. We've been cheating on you with some other people, but it's great to have you back. Let us know how you've been. Let us know what you've been up to, and as usual, anything you're excited about.
Been deep in the move, mate, deep in moving house. Spoke about it on a couple of podcasts ago, and yeah, I've been assuming the role of Mr. DIY, really. I've been trying my hand at everything. It's amazing what you can learn on YouTube and a bit of willingness. Yeah, I've been absolutely plowing into it, but it's been great. Loving the new place.
Built anything interesting?
I'm in the process of building a dual layered octagonal bookshelf. It's pretty special.
How did you come up with that?
If it works, it's going to be pretty special. So it's like, if you imagine like a small octagon inside a massive octagon, and then like books going all around it, all 360 around it, and then I put in like placeholders around to hold the books at certain angles so they don't just all collapse at the bottom. And then those placeholder bits of wood that are in between are like disguised as books, so it looks like the entire thing's floating.
Very nice.
That's the biggest bad boy.
What percentage certainty do we have that this is going to be made?
Mate, I'm confident.
Oh, you're confident. Nice.
Yeah, I'll smash it. Just takes time. It's probably the sort of thing that a carpenter could knock out in like an afternoon's work.
Yeah.
It would take me about a month part-time.
Well, I'm sure everyone's looking forward to seeing that. I certainly am. It'd be really
I'll do a reveal, mate, and a little house tour with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a little sheet put on top of it.
My favourite thing that I've made so far that is finished is I bought like a garden sculpture kind of thing of a man, like a Roman man, chopped the head off him, drilled down into the neck to then like build a plant pot coming up out of it. So it's like off at the neck, and it's got a big plant popping out the top. That looks sick. I've done that one already.
How did you think? What made you think? I know. I'll buy this and I'll fucking cut the top off it and build a plant pot.
Yeah, no, man. I think I like doing weird stuff with house things. I like doing stuff that's different. That, like I said to you, I think on the podcast a while ago, it'd be my worst nightmare just to like go to DFS and be like, yeah, I'll have that 4-piece suite, please, done.
Yeah.
You know, and then everything gets delivered and it goes in. I just want to do some different stuff. You're gonna spend a lot of time here. You know, you live in there, work here. Like, might be a nice gaff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as well, it's nice to put your own touch on things, isn't it? You know, nice to get your own things, and then you feel like you've really contributed to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually is quite an interesting analogy. Actually, I was speaking to somebody the weekend before last about this, and actually how I think from a more deep perspective, it's actually a way to really increase our happiness of ourselves. So like if you look at this superficially, so if you take your example of going to DFS and buying everything, you get everything, you put it in your house, you're done. Quick fix in a sense, probably would cost quite a lot of money as well. And there are things in our lives which are exactly the same as that. You could do all the things that make you happy if you have the money to do so, right? So you could buy yourself a new car, you could buy yourself a new phone, you could do all of these things that would make you happy. But actually, the things which probably would make you happiest and feel most secure and have the most self-worth are the little things that actually contribute, which you have to put a lot of effort into. It's not just about actually what can I do to put a plaster on this hole. It's actually what can I do that will make this more interesting? What can I do to make this more fun? And we actually spoke about this, I think, probably the first time we discussed moving, about how I think you mentioned before maybe that you weren't a big fan of moving, or is it me? I know I wasn't, but you said, actually diving into that process and really getting the most out of it was a real game changer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, instead of trying to almost avoid the work and just pay someone else to do it and not engage with it, actually getting involved and being a part of the process means that I've just appreciated it a whole lot more, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously not just moving, I think that applies to a lot of things. I think we all inherently feel a lot better going to bed that night when we know that we've contributed, we've done something, we've been a part of something, we've worked hard at something,
Yeah.
rather than just sitting there and buying ourselves some new clothes on ASOS or something.
I love the specific nature of that ASOS.
It is though, isn't it? I thought
Yeah.
about like last night. I put these new really nice metal legs on that. You know that crazy river resin table I've got.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Put some new metal legs on that. To set up a little like desk setup for Flo in the other room. Painted another part of the wall. I did a second coat. The paint was looking really good, and I went to bed like, yeah, I'm feeling fucking good about that tonight.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that was good stuff compared to if you just sit there scrolling through something on your phone and consuming something mindlessly. I feel like I always have that little thing in the back of my head, like you should have done more, you should have done a
mm,
bit better today. And it can be counterintuitive to think you want to like dive in and do more in order to feel more relaxed and feel
yeah.
better. In practice, it really does work.
Absolutely. So I think we can dive into our topics for today. And I think they're very, very relevant to a lot of people. And a lot of people will be thinking probably along these lines in one way or another. And the reason I really wanted to discuss this wasn't to kind of join the bandwagon of what everyone's saying, but actually, I know that both of us are big fans of going against the grain in saying things that maybe other people aren't thinking, or are thinking but totally disagree with, but actually trying to offer that view in a way of saying, hey, actually, have you thought of this yet? Or have you, have you maybe conceptualized that the way you're thinking about this isn't necessarily the best way? So I think we'll crack on. And the first topic I wanted to discuss with you is the closure of the gyms. And again, in a way of getting your perspective on things, seeing what you think of it. Obviously, being an avid gym goer yourself, it's obviously going to have a big impact on you. But yeah, I just want to kick off with that one and see what you think, really.
So I'm with the camp that I don't think closing gyms was the right decision. I don't think it was the best idea. And this doesn't justify the gyms, by the way. I think a lot of people can get triggered, or I've seen people getting triggered on people posting about things like gyms by saying, well, what about everything else? What about this industry? What about that industry? And that's fine. All that stuff's still valid. We're not talking about that thing right now. You know, it's a bit like during the Black Lives Matter stuff when someone would chirp up and be like, well, all lives matter. You're like, well, yeah, but we're talking about the black thing now.
Mm,
Like we're doing something else you're trying to bring over. I think it's similar, you know, like you don't have to gate crash it and be like, well, how come gyms are allowed to be open, but this can't be open and that can't be open? I think the entire thing just requires a bit more nuance, sharp,
yeah.
um, and a little bit more critical thinking rather than just saying everything has to be closed or everything has to be open, full stop. I can't believe that that's the best that we can come up with in this country. We're putting the minds together of all the scientists, all the politicians, all the people that inform public policy. I mean, surely we've got to have some better, more creative, nuanced approaches than full lockdown or nothing.
Yeah. See, I come at this from a slightly different angle, because I think of I obviously am biased because I want the gym to be open in that respect. Of course, I do. I think, but from my perspective and the way that my mindset is working in this instance, you could potentially have different industries open at different times, and you could say, okay, well, gyms can remain open because X, Y, and Z. But then from my perspective, I looked at that and went, but actually that wouldn't be a lockdown. That would be, I can go to the gym 3 times a day, and it defeats the object because, of course, where there are rules where you can't see loved ones and things like that in their homes, it kind of defeats the object going against that you could see all your friends in the gym, for example. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say, if we look at statistics and things like that, I think people's visions of reading statistics is just horrendous, and I'm not going to add to that pile of confusion for everyone by throwing a load more at you. I think if we take that out of the equation, and I think some people say, well, hang on, that is the whole equation. Infection rates in gyms are really low. I think from my perspective, I'm just looking at like the bigger picture here of going like, if everyone has to suffer together at the same time, because what's good for our mental health in going to the gym, that might be someone going to get their nails done, or that might be someone going to the pub, for example. And I know that obviously the pub has higher infection rates, and people will say that. And of course, that's probably very true. I think if everyone's in the same boat together, it's probably easier to manage.
No, man, I don't think you could. I don't think it's kind of like when you love an analogy.
I do
You know,
indeed.
like when you're in school, normally it was me being the stupid kid that looks up, and they're like, if someone doesn't own up to this behaviour, you're all going to be kept behind for detention. You know, even though like no one else has done something wrong, it was me that lobbed some wet tissue at the wall or something like that. But like everyone else gets punished for it. I think I don't really get why everyone would have to suffer in every industry if there's some clear industries that can be opened safely, and especially from like an economic perspective as well. You could also then lessen the economic burden on the government if you're opening a really good amount of certain industries where there are very low infection rates. Then you've only got to support those industries where there are much higher infection rates and those ones that do have to be closed. And then I think you could have a much better system as well in terms of financing those and bankrolling them while they're forced to be closed. Um, I also just think it's mad that you can like force these, especially all these big like independent gym owners and people that have big rents on their head and stuff like that. You can force them to close and tell them they're not allowed any business and then give them minimal support. It's just brutal for a lot of people going into this second lockdown. Really brutal.
Yeah, I mean, the economical argument to this is, I think, very different kettle of fish. And I agree. I think that there is, especially for people who are self-employed. I think that the self-employed, a lot of young PTs, for example, will suffer massively because, of course, the way that the government have done it is based on the last 3 years of tax returns. But if you only started PTing 2 years ago, then last year doesn't count, and the first year that you did effectively is counted as the 3-year average. So say, just for ease of maths, you earn, and I do mean for ease of maths here, say you earned £30,000 in that year, then they would actually calculate as you earned £10,000 every year for 3 years. And then you're effectively, your payback for that is based on that £10,000. And so even if you had a killer year as your first year as a PT, that's just never going to be enough to live on during these times. So I think, yeah, the economical argument is an outstanding one. And I think that, that in itself potentially causes arguments in other sections, because obviously there will be self-employed hairdressers or self-employed makeup artists who will be saying the same thing. And I think that it just comes back to that argument, I think, of like, where do you draw the line on things we keep open and things we keep shut if we want the whole country to come to a standstill? I think if you look at the north-south divide as well, it's seemingly that the north were taking the biggest hit for this stuff. And I think it's likely that we had to look at this and go, right, we can't just keep favouring the south. And I get your analogy 100% on, making everyone suffer. And I think actually Boris Johnson might have said in one of his talks in the Commons something like, I'm not going to make half of Cornwall come to a standstill when they've got no cases, even if, say, there's loads in Lincoln. He said, that's not fair. But then I do think, when does the movement around the country come to a stop? When do people stop going, right, I'm going to move to my other house, or I'm going to go and visit my friends or family down there and live there for kind of 6 months? So it's a really complex system. And I think that I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer to this, because it's all based on opinion and view, isn't it, really? And at the end of the day, I think we're all kind of, as I said earlier, like in this together. Before I kind of cross over to the next topic, did you have anything you wanted to just kind of round off on that one?
Maybe underscoring that it's obviously very complex, like you say. There's not a single right or wrong way to do it. But I do just wish that there was more thoughtfulness going into the process and more variables considered than like just either, again, being completely open or completely closed, and even something based on like vulnerable groups and age ranges. And there's a lot of ways that you could slice this up and dice it into a decent system. I do think the current lockdown isn't optimal. It certainly isn't the best way to go about it, but I don't get to make those decisions. So in the meantime, you've got to sit tight, you've got to crack on. And I'm not going to be someone who sits around and moans to everyone about it and tells everyone my views on it unless I'm directly asked, like in this scenario.
Yeah.
I think you've got to, as I always say, you've got to do the most you can with what you've got. And you've got to be able just to push forward regardless. Hopefully it does just stay contained to the month of November and be on our merry way back in gyms ASAP.
Absolutely. You've actually just brought us on to what I wanted to talk about next there as well. And that is kind of life outside the gym, life around the gym. I think that that's really, really important. I think
Is
that
that
it's,
a thing?
say again.
Is that a thing? Does that exist?
Gym. And I actually wanted to say, we've discussed before a lot of the things we like to do. But I think maybe for those who haven't maybe tuned into one of those podcasts or are joining us for the first time, surrounding the gym, what are kind of things that you like to do? What are ways that you like to pass time? Obviously, you've just said building things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anything else that you find is beneficial that may be increasing in time at the moment?
Getting out in nature is a massive one for me in any way, shape, or form. Going out for walks, going out and cycling, going out and just doing something that is not indoors, not behind a screen, and ideally that is completely devout of those things, like not even taking your phone with you, not even just giving yourself the option to be walking through a beautiful forest and scrolling through Instagram and not really paying attention. Yeah, nature's a huge one. Reading as well. Again, just being something that is offline, something that isn't in the same way that we normally consume media in as quick way as possible. And I'm definitely guilty of that. I'm ramping up podcast speeds quicker. I'm flicking through videos if it's not the bit that I want to be on. And, I'm all about efficiency in that. So I think it's important to be able to kind of counterbalance those things with practices like mindfulness, like meditation, like slow reading, like slow walking, things that aren't done with some sort of particular end goal in mind or some sort of productivity measure that you're trying to like hold yourself up to. Something that is just done purely for the task itself. And it's not often until I actually go and do those things that I realize just how much of a benefit they have. Because when you're sat working behind a computer or consuming something online, it can very much feel like this is all I want to carry on doing. I want to do more, I want to go deeper. And that's obviously how they get you in terms of dopamine response,
Yeah.
etc. So it's like not until you get out into that field and you actually breathe fresh air and you're like, oh shit, there's a world out here. Look, there's actually there's a sunset going on. Here's some grass. Here's some stuff that isn't digitally enhanced on my computer. I think you even said when we were chatting a bit before about how when things got a bit stressful with all the gym plans and changing everything over, the first thing you did is just go out of the house. You went for a drive. You
Yeah.
went somewhere that wasn't where you immediately are, and it can completely be a state change. I think that stuff is really important to hold alongside your more intense pursuits, like
Yeah.
smashing it in the gym, like smashing it at work, like being super strict with your macros. Yeah, so it just gets you out of that zone.
Yeah, I think all those points are fantastic. I think that I think one of the best thing I'm actually one of the things you mentioned I wanted to touch on quickly. I have you ever read the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch?
I've not read that book, but I'm familiar with the Pareto principle, isn't it? 80-20.
Yeah, Pareto principle, that's it. I'm
Yeah.
actually like three-quarters of the way through it at the moment. And it's interesting that you said that, spending kind of some time outside makes you realize how much you enjoy it. Because in that book, he actually discusses how, as you can probably tell from the title, the 80-20 principle, for those of you who don't know, is basically that we get 80% of something from only doing 20% of something else. And he actually talks about there are activities in your life which you get 80% of your happiness from, but only takes or only is 20% of what you do. And I think, as you pointed out there, Jack, if you look at all of the activities that you do, you've just said, I get a lot of happiness from these. And it's funny because I think when you're very mechanically minded, I'm going to say, where we do things in routine and we do things in mechanism because that's how it suits us the most. Sometimes things like walks and things like that become like a programmed thing. I must get my steps in for some people, that is. And I see this on Instagram all the time. I must get my 10,000 steps. I think, have you enjoyed that? Because actually there's probably some views or some feelings that you can pick up on that walk that would benefit you far more than that 10,000 steps ever will. And I think that a lot of people miss that. I think a lot of people miss the benefits that these small areas of life can give us. And I think that one of the reasons a lot of people are struggling is because they've got this the wrong way around. A lot of people are getting 80% of their enjoyment from 80% of the things they consider to be the most important things in their life. So if, for example, the gym is the most important thing in your life and that gets taken away, then that obviously is going to be a huge ricocheting effect. But I think, and having spoke to a few clients about that this week, it's about saying to yourself, look, okay, well, actually, probably I need to fill some more time with other things that I enjoy. Because actually, if I get injured, for example, or I have a situation that means I can't go to the gym, what am I left with? And I think it's really important that we have these other things and we have these other periods of time which give us happiness and give us wholeness and mindfulness. Because if we don't, and that stuff gets taken away, it almost holds us too much on the string. Do you know what I mean? We need to have lots of strings. And I'm not saying don't enjoy the gym. I love the gym. Don't get me wrong. And you know, I think it's fantastic. But I do also, more now than I ever have before, try to put more eggs in different baskets, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, the further you go down that route of being able to enjoy the smaller things, being able to enjoy the walks, the meditation, the reading, the slower, quiet stuff, the more you're actually going to be able to appreciate the big stuff, I think, rather than just blasting through it without really thinking about what you've done, what you've achieved, how you felt throughout it, or what it means for you, and not being able to reflect upon any of it. Right? Having that, I would say, slightly greater intuition and feeling for how things are going within yourself makes a huge difference when that stuff comes around. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
can be one of these people who's just like a hungry ghost looking for dopamine,
Yeah.
just floating about looking for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and always trying to stimulate yourself without ever on a term that I think people will often use as being able to um, really kind of actualize things, really kind of center things back in yourself rather than just always experience on the outside. How do you integrate those things back in? That's the kind of key word that people use, integration after some
Mm.
sort of practice. Are you just going and doing something and then jumping straight onto the next thing? Or are you actually taking the time to integrate that, feel it, understand how that can improve you, what parts that you liked, what parts you didn't like? And then you can optimize things further going forwards off the back of that.
You actually summarized that perfectly in an Instagram post once. It was you, I think. This is gonna be weird, but I believe you were either sat in or on the bonnet of your R8, and I think you said something like, you know, don't get me wrong, this thing makes me smile like a 7-year-old schoolgirl, but you know, that's the external. If you don't actually have that internal fortification, if you like, then actually this external stuff is never going to be enough. I've paraphrased that. You can find it on the page. But the thing for me is that we live in a world where, as you said, chasing down dopamine and chasing that is a hedonistic behavior. It's never pleasurable enough once you've had enough of it. You know, you maybe want a faster car, a more dangerous car, or the list goes on. But as you've always said, it's important that actually you take stock of the first thing before you present, or at least have a look at what maybe the situation is around that. And it's typical of that whole the grass is greener, when in actual fact the grass is pretty green under your feet more often than not. If you cannot appreciate that, and this is something I personally have struggled a lot with, if you can't appreciate the successes that you have had, it makes the whole going forward much harder, because how do you keep topping what you've already done? Especially if you're someone who's a high achiever, or someone who's achieved a lot of the goals they set out to achieve in the first place. How do you keep doing that? And the truth is you don't. And that's a surefire way to lead, in my opinion, to very low self-esteem and very low mental health as well. So outside of the gym then, so you've said, you know, you like going on walks, you like doing things. Have you always liked building, by the way? This is a new thing. I don't know if it's something you've always done or...
No, it's a new pursuit, mate. But I've always liked learning new things. I've always liked picking up new things and just adding to skills. Having skills that have utility, I think, is a really good way to boost your self-esteem and feel good
Yeah.
about yourself and what it is that you can do. And at quite a fundamental level, being able to make something with your hands and tools and be able to put stuff together like that is something that's actually brought me quite a lot of happiness and
Mm.
quite a lot of enjoyment from the process, and also obviously the outcome of what you get from that.
Yeah. Is Flo enjoying the new handyman around the place?
Oh, she loves it, mate. She loves it.
Jeans and one of those little hammer belts. I can imagine it now.
Yeah,
Little hammer twist.
safety hat whenever you're on site. Proper village people.
Yeah. I can imagine you actually making Flo wear one, right? You have to put this on. You're in the site, just testing. That's actually something I would do. Smack her on the head with it just to make sure it works.
Sign into site here, please, madam. Take health and safety very seriously.
Your exits are here, here, and here. In the event of a catastrophe, we take absolutely zero responsibility for your health. Everyone saves himself.
That's a key one.
Like all good waivers. And so the kind of thing I wanted to touch on then, just as a result of all this stuff, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and it made me realize that this was something which I'd never spoken about, and I don't hear many people talk about. And I think it has the potential to be taboo, but only because this was not common knowledge. For the next podcast. So moving swiftly on. This one, I think this has potential to boot. And I think that it is because there are so many different ways that we can hide behind these reasons. And that is my question of, well, it wasn't my question, but it was a question put to me and it was a challenging one. She asked me, do you think that you, as in me, and a lot of other people in this industry are suffering at the moment because they are their physiques are related and interchangeable with their mental health? So a bit like how you spoke about your car and it not being the pinnacle of happiness, but it does certainly put the cherry on the cake. But if you don't have the cake in the first place, it's kind of pointless. And she was saying to me that basically she felt that from her perspective that she felt lower at the moment because she couldn't go to the gym, but she'd narrowed that down to the fact that she felt physically worse. She was like, I feel physically worse. And she said, it's not that I am super physique based, or at least she didn't think she was. And she was saying, well, actually, I think maybe my physique means a lot more to my health, or at least my psychological health, than I thought it did. And it made me question. I sat here reading it and I was thinking like, wow, like that's a deep question. And like, obviously to answer these points, if you answer them well, I think you have to almost digest them first. But I thought, I'll put this to you today and see what you thought.
That's really interesting. That's very interesting. I think the overwhelming benefits from the gym mentally come from the process rather than the outcome. I.e., you may kind of be conflating the two at the moment and thinking, oh, I'm feeling worse because my physique is worse. But actually, even if your physique was the exact same as it is now, but you were able to go to the gym, you were able to see your mates at the gym, you were able to get that endorphin rush, you were able to go somewhere other than your house and have all these other things that impact our psychology positively, you probably would feel a bit like the 80-20 rule. You probably get about 80% of the benefit from those sorts of habitual type things and behaviors rather than necessarily the outcome. Now, the outcome definitely does still play a role, of course. How much that's going to affect you depends on how much of your self-worth and importance and honestly ego you have tied up in how you look. Just as I said earlier, when it comes to, I really like learning new skills. I like learning new things that have utility, because the more stuff that you have, just the more breadth you have across life, essentially, across any given domain. And so if something like, this month the gym is obviously on the back burner and training and my physique is on the back burner compared to where it was previously, I can dive into all these other things. I can go into all this DIY and learning all this new stuff and making all this new stuff. Maybe I want to spend more time cooking and making good meals and coming up with new recipes. Maybe you just want to spend more time with loved ones and deepen your relationships further. All these other things you can then start to pull on, and you can accept that just during this time, my physique isn't going to progress a lot. Now, if you're someone who was all about the gym and your physique, and you are, a physique competitor, and you've got a show coming up in a couple months, and you're really myopically focused on your physique, then you're going to suffer a whole lot more than someone who just goes to the gym, has a good physique, but has a ton of other stuff going on in their life. So it's going to massively be person to person situational in terms of how much it hits you. But understand that the only way to alleviate some of that is going to be to dive into some other pursuits. I used to say to clients a lot when they had crazy things on with work, or they were really busy with certain things going on, like family stress or relationships or something like that. I'd say, yeah, okay, maybe we've not progressed in the same sort of way that we would like to with physique or training, or not hitting your macros, whatever it is that month or that week. But actually, we have to look in a broader kind of way and look at the other things that you've progressed in here. Like stress and progress don't just exist in one tiny little vacuum for training, and then one tiny little vacuum for family, one other tiny little vacuum for work. All of these things are open systems that have interplay with one another. And so you have to be confident in saying, yeah, do you know what? Like, my physique is not going to get any better this month. No way. For the level of training that I'm at and the amount of equipment that I have at home, I'm not going to improve on my physique this month. However, I can massively improve my living environment and my house. I can improve my relationship. I can improve all these other things, and I can look at the progress and monitor the progress of them and really enjoy those processes instead of focusing on what it is I'm potentially losing. Because you best believe in December, I'll be back in the gym, absolutely smashing it and looking to progress my physique again. And then the DIY stuff is going to take a little bit more of a back burner, and that's absolutely fine as well. Don't hold too much ego and too much self-importance in any one of those baskets, because then you're really potentially putting yourself in a tough position if one of those things gets taken away from you, as it has now with the gym.
That was there was so many points in what you just said that I was like, remember that, remember that, remember that. I think the first one you said, and I think is the most important, and I think this is the first hurdle I jumped to this question, and that was, why am I doing this? And I think that for a lot of people, that why will determine whether you are okay mentally now or not okay mentally now. And if you are someone who holds your self-respect in regards of your physique, then you probably aren't doing too well at the moment, because you're seeing that, as Jack, you just said, it's not like, for some people, Jack was referring, I believe, to his exact self when he said, he won't make progress here. But you have to remember, this guy's trained for years, super experienced. For some of you who've just started, you can make tons of gains from home.
Yeah, for sure.
Really is loads. I just wanted to clarify that, just in case anyone was sat at home going, whoa. But the key thing here is in distinguishing, from my perspective, the why. And if that why is actually, I do love the process. I like the challenge of getting up early to go to the gym. I like feeling stronger. A lot of the ladies, when they do their first, 100-kilo deadlift, which is 225, for example, or they do anything that's like a milestone to them, I feel great, And clearly in that moment, you can see how there's a small extrinsic factor to that actually you have done something which has made you happy. But also there's pride in yourself. There's pride in what you've achieved. There's pride in that process. And I think that was the first thing that crossed my mind when I was asked this, was, why do I do this? Because I thought that has to be the number one. And like, I think if I was being brutally honest, there have been times in my life where I have relied more heavily on my physique for my own happiness, because it's something that I've been able to control amongst things I couldn't. And I have to put my hand up here and say, that's definitely not a healthy way to be. But I didn't know any better way at that time. I can look back now and go, I wish I'd have done this, this, and that, but it's just not that easy. I think, unless you have help, and that was something at the time that I couldn't comprehend. And I look back now, and it took me ages to answer this question, even to press record to the question, because I was like, there's so many different avenues here. And I think that the next thing on that is also the understanding that what this isn't final. This is a period of time, which we've already had a week of. We've got 3 weeks left, where at the end of that 3 weeks, you have a decision. You can look back at this 3 weeks, or 4 weeks in total, and say, I did well there. You can meet up in the pub with your friends or whatever it is you choose to do, and they're all moaning about how shit it was. But you could say, well, you know, if you're Jack, you could say, well, I beat this super cool bookshelf. I spent some more time with my partner. I didn't collapse some kind of construction work on her head. You know, all of these lovely things. And the same for me, you know, focusing some more time with Katie is a big one for me. And the thing with that is simply that I don't always prioritize necessarily the things that make me happy. I prioritize what I think make other people happy. You know, for example, when it comes to work, I'll often make sure that I get everything done. You know, I said to you, I pumped out 3 18-hour days last week. And they weren't like 18 hours of like, you know, pissing around. I actually was only asleep for 3 hours, but I can't count the other couple because obviously I wasn't working at that point. But I did that because I really didn't want to let these people down. I wanted to get their home plans out. I wanted to do that and make sure that they were secure and happy, because that internally brings me happiness. But in doing that, I also forget the thing that, or the thing, God, I hope she doesn't listen to this. I forget about the person who also brings me a load of happiness, you know. And I would say I brought a lot of happiness to as well. Luckily, she's very patient. But then if you were with me, I guess that's probably going to have to be your number one attribute. Um, and so what I'm trying to get to with this whole ramble, I guess, is that you have to understand where those happinesses lie for you. And if they are solely physique based, and as you said, Jack, if you're about to compete, you know, if you're gearing up to compete, this will be fucking stressful, because actually this is a big hole in your bucket of trying to succeed at something. But then the same rule still applies. If you're competing in the UK, obviously some people have more equipment than you'll have, but you can still look back at this 3-week or 4-week period and go, did I make the success of that period in whichever way that is for you, the success it could have been, or did I just kind of mope and go, fuck, you know, this is shit? And I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I think you have to, at a fundamental level, be able to step back from it, look at it from, you know, whether you take like an aerial view, looking down on your problems, or like stepping back out of an eye of a storm, or you're looking at the washing machine rather than being in that washing machine of thoughts spinning around everywhere, however you want to visualize it. Take a bit of time to step back and think about it and ask yourself, is what I'm doing or what I'm thinking effective? And what's the real point of it? And now what? That's what I always like to ask myself. Okay, now what? You know, we've got a problem. All right, now what? I can't go to gyms. Okay, now what? Like, what is that next step
Yeah.
that you can take after that that can actually make a difference? Because no matter how much I try, I'm not going to be able to go to the gym this month. That's just not a reality that I exist in. I'm not going to fly over to the US and live there for the next month. I'm not willing to do that and upend my life and, you know, leave flow behind here, and just for the sake of having, you know, 20 training sessions instead of 0 in the gym in the month of November. So now what? Now what is it that I'm going to do?
Yeah.
Right? What is that next step that you can take? Because we get caught up in this spiral of thoughts without ever actually stopping and taking the time to go, is what I'm thinking effective? Is what I'm doing effective? Is this actually helping? And giving yourself that little bit of distance, that slight pause in between that next thought stream that's going to be coming through, is a really effective way to let those ideas come up and let those different perspectives come through. Because when it comes down to it at a fundamental level, you're not doing anything good for yourself or your mental health by spending the time lamenting it and moaning about it. You have to be committed to moving forward in any which way possible. And if you can't move forward at the moment in terms of your gym training, start looking to those other things that you can move forward with, and then get planning for when you can get back in the gym, December, January time, what it is you can do in the future. You know, like Zana said, it's only temporary. It's always going to be there. And when you look back on your life, I think a really interesting thing, actually, have you ever read I think it's called like The 5 Biggest Regrets of the Dying or something by Bronnie Ware?
No.
I think it's just a really long blog post. I don't think it's been made into a book. But she was a palliative care nurse who did a wide scale survey, if you will, talking to all of these people who were at the end of their life. And one of the main regrets, it may even have been number one of absolutely everyone she dealt with, tens of thousands of people, I think, over this time, was that they wish they'd let themselves be happier. And it's key that they'd let themselves be happier. Not they wish they were happier, not they wish they were more successful, not they wish they had a fitter partner, like none of these external end outcome superficial things. It was that they'd let themselves be happier. And when you look back, even in December, January, let alone in a couple of years' time, do you want to think that you just let yourself be miserable for all of November? Or do you want to think that actually you let yourself be happy with other pursuits and other things going on, and then resume right back where you were in December and picked up again?
Yeah, I think that view you made just at the start about actually looking at this from maybe a bird's eye view, or from a view of not what you are in the situation of. That's exactly what I was discussing with you. And you said, "What now?" If I had my book here, I would show you what was written at the very top of it, because basically, when they dropped the news that the gym was shut, I grabbed my car keys and I drove off. And a lot of people probably thought, he probably just going to vent. And to a certain extent, like, my driving is one of these things where I can't really think and drive at the same time. If I choose some good roads, I just like to drive. I'm not going to choose a long straight road. That's not going to help me. I need to be focusing on something else. And I think for me, that's a processing. That is my brain going, right, let me have a look at this before I emotionally have a look at this. Because my emotional reaction would have probably just been to have a breakdown and cry, to be quite honest, because I know the effect that's going to have on all my clients, which right or wrongly affects me. I like to think that I get very much involved in these people's lives, and therefore when they're upset, I feel upset. And the thing I actually do then is I take a nice long drive. I take some nice roads. I do my thing for half an hour, 45 minutes. And then I sat in a lay-by with my notepad and I literally wrote at the top of my book, what next? What do I need to do now? And I tell you what, my mind was so clear. And
Mm-hmm.
I came back and Katie came straight up to me. She's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay." I was like, "I am actually brilliant. I feel great." And I think she was a bit like, "You're just faking this. This is bullshit. You obviously aren't feeling fake." And I said, "To be honest with you, I've now taken the view that what will be at this point. I can't do anything more than the things that I can do. And I have a list of things that I can do, and I'm going to go and do them. And you can bet your bottom dollar I'll do them to the best of my ability, because that's all I can actually control at this point." And then she kind of looked at me as if to say, like, "Oh dear." She kind of, I think, probably knew what was coming. And I just, I started my list and I just got going through it. And I think for a lot of people, and I'm not trying to sound like some kind of higher priest here, but the emotional thing comes first for a lot of people. And we were supposed to have a call a few days ago, and I know I had to message you and say, like, I just can't do it today. And quite frankly, as I've said to you, emotionally, I just couldn't be there because I was spent at that point. So, I think what I did was I went, right, I'm going to get everything done I know I can do. And then emotionally, I will let myself have, well, I say let myself, I didn't really choose to have it on that day, but, that's what comes with that situation. And the really interesting thing that you then went on to discuss was letting yourself be happy. Really interestingly, I was listening to a book. I listen to a lot of audibles, by the way, so read, listen, same thing for me. I cannot remember. I've been trying to dig this out while I was talking about that. But he talks about, if I think of this, I'll mention it. But he talks about how it can sometimes be harder to be miserable than it can to be happy. And it was quite interesting. I was like, how is it hard to be miserable? But then I actually think about it, the body language you go through, you almost just like mope around, but actually it can be easier to get yourself out of that because we function better on happy feelings, right? I think it's fair to say that we're much more positive. Look at, the way that you described yourself building that thing at the start, really joyous, happy, involved and present with it. It's like hey, look at this, is really sick. And when I said to you, you think, absolutely, I'm going to get it done. Obviously, I'm going to get it done. And that like that motivates me. I want to build some shit. But I think for many people, it's that instant reaction, because when times have been bad in the past, it's easy to feel safe in that miserable state. And that might sound bizarre, but we often do the things we feel most comfortable doing. And it's the same thing with some anxieties and some depressive states. And I'm probably going to cop some flack for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is that we will go back into those states. If anyone listening to this has got anxiety, ask yourself this question. Do you ever have days where you feel really good, and then like halfway through the afternoon, your brain will be like, hey, you've not worried about this yet today. Like, fancy thinking about that? And you're just like, what the fuck? Like, leave me be. Why are you doing that? And it's perpetually because we feel more comfortable in a state that we know the best. And that's where we have to fight that battle. And it can be grossly uncomfortable. And it's a battle where we're saying, I can actually be happy here. You know, if I brought Katie in here now, she'd probably have a rant to everyone about how I perpetually don't see happiness in things. And that's because I'm the sort of person, and I think that you'll probably see this, that I think I've done this, and now I can do this. But the truth is, and it's something I've learned massively in the last 6 to 8 months, is that I never stopped to be happy with the things that I had done in those moments. And that in turn doesn't create that overall happiness at the end goal. And so that end goal to me becomes a process of, well, you know, I did it, so obviously why wouldn't I have done it? When you finish your building of the bookcase, I'm pretty sure you'll be happy with that and be like, yeah, this is sick. But like old me would have looked at that and gone, well, obviously it's sick. I put a load of time into it and I did follow the instructions. Why wouldn't it be good? But then everyone's like, why can't you just be happy about that? And I think like nowadays I'm more like, just try and be happy about anything. I think that's probably quite annoying, and I'll probably find my middle ground at some point. But it is important to try all these things with yourself and see where you land.
Yeah, I definitely have an element of that though, like you say about how you get to the end of something, you're like, yeah, of course, you expect that outcome. Um, and I think that just lends to maybe not having such ecstatic highs at certain times, almost like giddy happiness and surprise and just like stupendous amazement at something. Because like you say, you're like, well, yeah, I've done the work to put it in to get there. So it makes sense that it's there. But I think something that makes up for that is enjoying the whole process along the way and being able just to look back at it with contentment and not having any of those thoughts in your mind at the end of like, I should have done more, I should have done this different, that little corner should be better, what am I going to build next, what's going to happen? Instead, just engaging with what's right in front of you, what it is that you've done and what the process has been, and almost being at peace with that rather than trying to either pick faults in it or force happiness around it. Appreciating the process for what it was and then giving yourself the time to appreciate it before moving on to the next thing.
I think I totally agree with that. Jack, as a lasting point, anything that you'd like to just round off with? Any advice, anything whatsoever for the people before we leave them to their afternoons?
This month of November, do the most you can with what you've got. The stuff that you can't control, let that shit slide. It'll all come right back to you December, January onwards. And if you're going to have a long and prosperous life, you've got a lot of time to train hard in the gym. So don't fret November. Find some other good stuff to do. Fill your cup in other areas of life and get through it as best you can.
Jack, thank you so much as always. It's a real pleasure to have you on. Great chatting to you, and thank you very much. Guys, have a good day. Speak soon. Bye for now.